Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of podcasts. We have cookies.
Cookies? Me love cookies.
Hey, I'm Gina.
And I'm Amber.
And we are here to bring you the Weird True Crime Podcast, where we cover true crime cases that will leave you asking yourself, did that really happen?
We'll dive into well-known and not-so-known cases throughout history. Some are unsolved, and some are just unbelievable.
We'll also talk about current news topics that range from kooky to questionable on episodes that we like to call Weird Headlines.
Be sure to subscribe and listen on your favorite podcast service.
Hey ya! This is a true crime podcast, and the host can have a filthy mouth at times. Oh, that's me. So if you're looking for Mr. Rogers, he's down the street in his beautiful neighborhood. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your sparkly host, CJ. I kind of feel like fall weather is upon us here on the coast of Oregon. We've had several rainy days already, and the weather's definitely getting colder. But I can really tell by the changing of leaf colors when I'm on my walks. I love to see the pretty orange, yellow, and red leaves that have fallen on the street. Plus, that's usually the first indicator it's spooky season and my birthday month. Shout out to all fellow Libras out there! Whoop whoop! Well, my daughter and her boyfriend took a trip to California for the past several days, and I've been watching their 2 big dogs. And I also watched my neighbor's 2 little dogs as well. With my dog, that makes 5 dogs. There's no way for me to walk all 5 at the same time without one of us getting hurt. But the kids watched my dog while I was gone in Austin, and I get paid for watching the neighbor's dogs. So I make do the best I can. The 3 cats are no problem at all, and I'll happily feed all the animals, let them out to potty, and even occasionally snuggle with them. But I'm not going anywhere near the kids' pet snake. Ugh. George the snake is on his own, in his tank, in their room, under lock, at least until the kids come home. And I'm really sad because my little dog, Nilla, my 13-year-old little girl, I think she jumped off the couch funny, and now her back legs aren't working very well. She's still somewhat mobile, and I've been letting her sleep on a heating pad. I think the heat helps. I know getting old sucks. Find me on the socials as Rainbow Crimes most places. And please consider joining my Patreon for ad-free early release episodes. A unicorn named in your honor, and 1 extra episode called a Patreon exclusive episode at the end of every month. Plus, if you provide your mailing address, I'll send you some Beyond the Rainbow and Darkcast Network goodies. Things I hand out at the True Crime and Pride events. I'll leave a Patreon link for you in my show notes. Our missing but not forgotten LGBTQ person this episode is a trans woman. At least I believe she's a trans woman. 54-year-old Ginger Eastman from Missoula, Montana. She actually disappeared from Helena, Montana on April 9th of this year, 2023. I believe Ginger is indigenous, which means it's possible that she, or I probably should use the they pronoun, are a two-spirit. But my understanding to call yourself a two-spirit doesn't make you a two-spirit. Your tribe has to decide. Two-spirit people embody both feminine and masculine characteristics. But if you're not native or indigenous, it's inappropriate to call yourself a two-spirit. Ginger is 5'9", 180 pounds. They have black, straight, shoulder-length hair, brown eyes, and a full face. There's not a whole lot of information given about Ginger, like what she was doing when she disappeared, but I'll put a picture of her on my website. If you have any information regarding Ginger's disappearance, please call the Helena Police Department at 406-447-8461. Do you ever let your mind wander randomly? I sometimes think about what it'd be like to be LGBTQ in another country. For example, the Scandinavian countries seem to be very accepting of the community. Then, of course, you have the 64 countries that are still living under a rock where it's illegal to live your truth and be your fabulous self. The country of Chile, or Chile, in South America lays somewhere in the middle. Chile is a little farther behind on their LGBTQ protective laws than some of the other South American countries, but they're farther ahead than some of the others. In 1999, Chile did pass some laws to make same-sex relationships in that country no longer illegal, but as for anti-hate crimes against the community, they still had work to do, and that came years later. A heinous act against a gay man that occurred March of 2012 was instrumental in expediting some of the protective laws in Chile for LGBTQ+. In fact, this case has been called the Chilean Matthew Shepard case. Right there with that, we know it's not going to end well for our gay victim. 24-year-old Daniel Maurice Zamudio Vera was a little cutie pie. He may have been considered a man that was in his early 20s, but from pictures, he looked just like a little boy. One thing I do find a bit frustrating when researching some cases from other countries, well, even here, I guess, is how tough it is to find out what kind of person the victim was. And I honestly don't know why that's always so important to me, but it is. I feel like it humanizes the victim even more, and it allows me to be able to relate to him. But as for Daniel's personality and what he was interested in, I have no idea. I can only make up stories in my head based on pictures that I've seen of him. Don't worry, I won't share the stories in my head. I had you a little worried there, didn't I? Honestly, what happened on March 3rd, 2012 in Santiago was barbaric and was a total disregard for human life. No one should ever have to suffer through what Daniel had to. The evening of March 3rd, Daniel was walking through a park in Santiago. Suddenly, he was jumped by 4 men. The 4 men, leader Patricio Garay and his followers Alejandro Tapia, Raul Fuentes, and the youngest Fabian Mora, they cornered Daniel. And then they began to beat and kick him until he fell to the ground. But they didn't stop at that. They continued kicking Daniel as one of the men broke a bottle over Daniel's head, causing him to fall into unconsciousness. One of the men took a stone and broke a leg of Daniel's by bashing it repeatedly into Daniel's leg. Then they burned him with cigarettes, and they used the broken bottle to carve swastikas into Daniel's body. The torture and abuse of Daniel went on for over an hour in that park. When Daniel was found, he was taken to the hospital, where he died from his injuries 25 days later. The Santiago police identified the suspects in Daniel's murder. They arrested the 4 men and charged them with first-degree murder. When the trial started, the youngest man involved in the brutal killing of Daniel was also given the lightest sentence because he was fully cooperative and he didn't have any type of criminal record. 2 of the other men, Alejandro and Raul, they each received 15 years of incarceration for their part of Daniel's death. And the ringleader, Patricio, he was given a life sentence. Now, hearing that Chile had white supremacists in their country was very new to me. I guess I really never thought about it before. But white supremacists are everywhere, no matter what color their skin actually is. And all of these men were Chilean with a browner tint to their skins, but they seemed to practice white supremacist beliefs, including beating a gay man. A young, petite gay man who was alone and vulnerable at night in the park. You know what they really are? Cowards. It took 4 of them to gang up on Daniel. They attacked him in the dark. These guys really take the cake of assholism. How could it have been any worse? They could have ganged up on an elderly person, a child, an animal. Fuck these chicken shits. In my opinion, they all should have gotten life sentences without parole. Now, what good came from the murder of Daniel? Believe it or not, Daniel's death, while a horrid tragedy, wasn't in vain. His death and the manner of it was so shocking it even went all the way to the United Nations. 2 months after Daniel's murder, the Chilean Congress passed an anti-hate crime bill in May of 2012. The bill cleared with a 25-3 vote. This bill sat in limbo for 7 years until Daniel's murder, and then the president of Chile expedited the bill. The bill basically says it's a crime to discriminate on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender, appearance, or handicap. Now, of course, there were some religious groups opposed to the bill as it might lead to legalizing, gay marriage. Lord forbid. That would be a fate worse than death to allow 2 people who love each other and want to spend the rest of their lives together to marry. What a travesty. And guess what? It took until December of 2021, but Chile finally passed the law making it legal for gay people to marry and for same-sex couples to adopt. So take that, Bible thumpers! I guess I shouldn't pick on them for their beliefs because Chileans have historically been a Catholic country. But when your religion interferes with what should be simple human rights, it just rubs me the wrong way for sure. Rest in power, Daniel, and I'm sorry that it took you losing your life for things to change in your country. Our True Crime Quickie this episode is a twisted case out of New York. And it's another dating site murder plus case. This one happened in April 2018. The beginning of April, David Hyde drove from his sister's house in Reading, Pennsylvania to see a friend in New York City. David had been talking to someone in New York City that he met on a gay app for a little while now. It's not been made clear if this was the friend he was heading to see, or if meeting this guy that he'd been talking to was an added perk to seeing another friend of his in New York City. A little more about David. He actually was living with his sister to save some money to buy houses and flip them for profit. David was now an interior designer, but he used to be a male model in Philadelphia. Now that he was in New York City, David was set to meet 41-year-old James Corin Johnson, who went by Corin. Corin and his longtime partner had broken up while they were living in Georgia together, and Corin decided to move back to Brooklyn, where he was originally from. Both he and David were looking to start a new chapter with someone in their lives, and they matched on the dating app. David's sister was worried when she got home from work. She's a correctional officer, and David and his car were gone. He apparently didn't communicate with her about his trip. She tried calling him and texting him, but to no avail. Finally, around 4 a.m. on April 9th, she received a text from David's phone. The message simply said, "Hey." She didn't get the message until she woke up later that morning, and she took her phone off silent. She thought the message was odd, but she felt like she didn't have much reason to really be concerned anymore because he answered her. About a half an hour after David's phone texted his sister, his phone placed a 30-second call to 911. No one was dispatched. David's phone called 911 again around 6 a.m. This time there was a recording of the caller, and the voice is high-pitched and shaky. So high-pitched that the dispatcher references the caller as ma'am, but indeed it was not a woman, it was a man. When the police arrived, the man who answered the door for the police had bruises and one of his fingers had been badly bitten. Another man was also in the apartment. This man was lying on his back with a knife sticking out of the side of his chest. He also had bite marks on his chest and was lying in a pool of his own blood. The man was dead. The man was Corin Johnson. David told the police Corin attacked him, so he stabbed Corin in self-defense when Corin wouldn't let him leave the apartment. David was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Now, here's the weird twist to this case. Corin was being accused of sexual assault by another man just a week before he ever met David, maybe even days before. The other man had also met Corin on a dating website. I have to keep calling this guy the other man because his identity is never disclosed. The other man alleged that he went to Corin's apartment after he smoked some meth. The two men engaged in consensual oral sex, and then Corin suggested he invite some other guys over to have a gangbang and film it. But this frightened the other man, so he said no when he tried to leave. Allegedly, when the other man tried to leave, Corin threatened him with violence and then forced him into anal sex. After the deed was done, the other man showered and then went to the hospital and reported the incident. Here's something. If that guy went to the hospital to get a rape kit done, I don't think you're ever supposed to shower before that. You're washing away the perpetrator's DNA. I was curious if I was right, so I looked it up. And what do you know? There was a report written by the American Academy of Forensic Scientists in 2020. And it looks like they were questioning it also due to new DNA techniques. Here's what they found. Sexual assault kit submission rates significantly decrease in cases where the victim has engaged in post-assault actions, such as bathing or showering. The belief that these actions diminish the possibility of finding prosecuting evidence heavily contributes to this decline. This belief must now be reevaluated in the light of improved DNA analysis methods that can yield CODIS-eligible DNA profiles. Bathing or showering has been found to be a significant negative predictor of sexual assault kit submissions by law enforcement. However, DNA can be collected from skin and successfully analyzed regardless of the victim bathing or showering. To me, it sounds like they're saying even if someone has bathed or showered after being sexually assaulted, they should have a kit done on them anyway because DNA might be found on them somewhere else. It's good to know. And I'm purely looking at this from a cold scientific approach. And this information comes from a highly reputable source, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. DNA can be gathered from a victim who showered or bathed, but it would definitely be much stronger if the victim doesn't shower or bathe. Law enforcement and hospitals should also probably be told of this so they don't reject doing kits on victims. While reading all of this, my empath kept coming out and thinking, oh, honey, the first thing I'd want to do would be to wash all the filth from the perpetrator off of me, too. Probably many of you think the same. So when the other man went to the hospital and got a sexual assault kit taken, he was absolutely right to do so. After he filed his report, New York City police didn't do much about the other man's alleged rape. That is, until they found Corin dead in his apartment. And the New York City Police Department, they assigned the same detective that was assigned to the alleged rape case of Corin's to that of his murder. That detective took pictures he had of Corin's deceased body, and he sent them to the other man who claimed to be raped by Corin. To me, that's not very professional police work. And I also wonder if it's even legal to do that. All arrows point to it being wrong. On April 30th, 2018, David had a hearing for his trial to be set. Once it was set, it was a shit show of continual postponements for one reason or another. When his case finally went to trial, he was up for second-degree murder. He was claiming self-defense, and the jury ended up rejecting his self-defense claims, but they also acquitted him of murder, and they called Corin's death manslaughter. David was found guilty of that, and he was sentenced to 12 years for Corin's murder. Do you see what I mean about this being a twisted case? There wasn't just one crime, but potentially two. And if you count the detective sending the picture of a deceased man to an alleged victim, that might have been a crime too. Or maybe just in my head. Rest in power, Corn. Love you, Rainbow Warriors. You matter. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.